All right, moving over to the next matchup here. It is another bantamweight matchup, but for the males, and it is between Gafurov, who comes in at -120, and his opponent Wiklacz, who comes in at +100. Now, I'll start off on the Gafurov side of things, who started 2025 with a bang, a big upset victory over the -550 favorite and undefeated prospect at the time, Rinya Nakamura. Gafurov did a good job in terms of utilizing his footwork, his takedown defense, and big power shots to really hurt Nakamura, who we know is still working on his striking game, but is a high-level wrestler. There's really only one moment in the third round where we saw Gafurov go for a takedown, and we saw Nakamura reverse it in midair, end up on top, get a decent bit of control time, but Gafurov was able to work back to his feet and then land big shots once again, just as he was doing for the majority of that fight. He ended up clean sweeping Nakamura on the scorecards, which was, very surprising. That was a fight that I didn't get to watch live as I was out, being a human being. But upon rewatching it now properly, it was very impressive what Gafurov was able to do, especially in his previous fight against Kyung Ho Kong, where he gave up a handful of takedowns, spent some time on his back, but eventually worked back to his feet and landed more significant damage, which ended up leading to him winning that fight and snapping that 2-fight losing streak he had. But he is a guy that's been quite underrated in his UFC career. I would, admit that I was kind of low on him as well, losing to John Castaneda and quickly getting submitted by Said Nurmagomedov. You can see some of the holes in his game. He's more of a power puncher with his striking rather than setting things up with combinations and the jab. His wrestling game is also not that bad either, but I think there are some shortcomings in his game that a lot of guys can take advantage of, just as we saw, like I said, Nurmagomedov and Castaneda do. Now he's going up against former KSW bantamweight champion Wiklacz, who pulled off a big upset of his own last time around, as he was able to pick up a split decision win over Patchy Mix. Now we know Patchy gone over to Rizin. That was the last fight for Mix in the UFC, which was very underwhelming considering the amount of hype that Mix had coming into the UFC. We can give him a pass for the Mario Bautista loss, but he looked kind of slow and stuck in mud against Wiklacz, but you have to give Wiklacz the benefit of the doubt there. He was threatening well with guillotines, which really scared Mix off from getting his grappling going. Wiklacz was also more effective in the striking realm, landing his long-range weapons, good kicks, and stayed on the aggressiveness. And even when Wiklacz finally got that top position in the first round, he was able to land big shots and create that hematoma over Mix's right eye, I believe it was. But Wiklacz is a solid prospect, right? He was a guy, 29 years old, had a very good run with the KSW promotion. Obviously, their most recent bantamweight champion before, jetting over to the UFC. He's now 13-1-1 over his last 15 fights. Although 5 of those fights took place against the same opponent, Sebastian Prisbis. I'm not even going to try to figure out how to say that guy's name, but he ended up beating him more often than not. There was a draw in there. Sebastian was able to finish him in their first matchup, but then I think first or second fight, but then since then Wiklacz has kind of had his number. He's a very solid submission specialist, nasty guillotines, as we obviously saw him threaten Patchy Mix with. That's how he was able to beat Sebastian last time out. Decent striking game. He stays active enough from distance with his long-range weapons. I love his kicking game as well, but even in the grappling realm, he's not a greatest wrestler, but his active submission game makes him very hard to really settle on top of. Now, he normally showcases good cardio, so to see him slow down late against Patchy Mix was a little bit of a question mark, but I'm going to kind of chalk that up more so to UFC jitters. First UFC fight, high-profile fight as well, but he did enough good work through those first 2 rounds to really get the win there. But I think we might see a better and more complete version of him this time around. 1, fighting in the UFC Apex, but 2, getting those UFC jitters out, right? I believe it was a pay-per-view that he fought on last time, so a lot more platform, a lot bigger of a platform, a lot more of an audience. This time around, he's already gotten it through, arguably against a more difficult opponent last time around. Now he's going up against Gafurov. Now, again, both these guys sprung upsets last time around, so they are being quite underrated by the public, and I think that's why we're seeing a very close line here as well. And it makes sense. This is a close fight. When I originally saw the odds here, I believe it was a pick'em, but now it seems like money is slowly trickling in on the Gafurov side of things, which pushes him up to the slight favorite at -120. But I think this is a fight that Wiklacz could really threaten with his aggressiveness, his ability to latch onto submissions. I think he could stick Gafurov at distance. Even if Gafurov looks for takedowns here, I think that could put him into some trouble. I think Wiklacz is a threatening enough submission specialist to catch Gafurov into some bad spots. And as we saw Gafurov make a mistake against Said Nurmagomedov, Wiklacz could absolutely do the same thing here to Gafurov. So, Gafurov might have a little bit of power advantage on the feet, but I think Wiklac's height and reach advantage will allow him to really stick Gafurov from distance. That might pull out a desperation takedown from Gafurov, and that's where Wiklacz could really get to work with his submission game, reversals, or even just threatening straight up with that guillotine and eventually getting the submission there. So I got to go with the poll here. I like that we're getting plus money on him right off the bat here. So I'm going to go Wiklacz, and I think he gets the submission win over Muin Gafurov.